a lot of stress in my life manifests in physical symptoms and illness. And so I am so cognizant of how am I supporting myself, my well-being, and it's the inner work, right? That, everyone's looking for the results, like, how do I make six figures my first, year in business? And it's like, okay, let's look inside and do the inner work to get the outer results. And like I said, I can't even imagine starting an entrepreneurial journey without having that support.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Carried Away with your host, me, Carrie Murray, founder of the Bra Network. I'm thrilled to have my guest today, Sheila Eggert. She's not only a Bra member, she is the founder of Your Inner Circle Coaching, a six-figure leadership and human potential company. Ooh, I love that, potential. As a certified leadership and transformation coach, Sheila has a passion for helping leaders embrace a new model of leadership with grace and ease. That's right. Grace and ease, two wonderful sounding words. This sets up for their personal well-being as the foundation to unleash levels of success they never thought possible. Sheila, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad
we're having our conversation, no matter what natural disaster,
right? If you didn't know, LA was hit with a hurricane recently and then an earthquake. So nothing was going to keep Sheila and I apart. I'm so glad to have you here. First, I want to start with transformation leadership coach. If I would have asked 11-year-old Sheila, what are you going to be when you grow up? Would you have said a transformation coach?
I probably would not have known that. But I always had this feeling of wanting to help people. Like when I played with my dolls when I was a little girl, it was teacher, but also caretaker, like taking care of my dolls or, whatever. So did I have the words transformation and leadership coach back then? No, but I think I always knew that I was meant to do something to support and help other people.
I love that. And you very much have a very nurturing energy that comes off. And even when I met you in person and just on Zoom, like it's really, really warm and welcoming. So you really convey that. So maybe those dolls just felt really taken care of back in the day.
They did.
But I know you weren't in this for, your entire career. Tell me about your journey into becoming this coach. Like, where did you begin? Did you go to college? Did you, start someplace else in corporate America? Tell me about Sheila's journey.
Yeah. So interestingly, you mentioned college. So I went to college having no idea of what I wanted to do. And so at the recommendation of my dad, went to business school. And freshman year, you had a number of required courses, and one of them, aside from accounting and economics and computer science, for some reason, psychology and sociology were two of the core courses to get into the business school. And I just loved them. And I was like, oh my God, I love this psychology, sociology, and like this accounting, not so much. And I remember after my freshman year, the school that I went to, you had to get a certain GPA your freshman year in the core courses to get into the business school. I was always a great student. So I get the GPA, I get into the business school. A lot of the guys around me in my dorm that were like so dedicated to getting into the business school did not get in. I get in and I go, oh my God, I don't really want to do this. So I went to see my guidance counselor and I just said, I don't know what to do. I love the psychology and sociology classes and I really didn't like the business classes. And he said, well, why don't you just change your major to psychology? And, at the time I was just like, what? Like, what are you going to do with a psychology major? And what's so interesting is now in hindsight, my psychology classes set me up for business and leadership and managing people and all of that much better than any of those business classes ever would have. So I did end up with a business minor and a psychology major. came out of school, and the really logical place for psychology was to get a degree and become a therapist. And it just wasn't calling to me. So I went and looked for a job. And of course, with a psychology degree, an undergraduate degree in psychology, going to apply to businesses in New York City, I was asked, how fast do you type? And yeah. So I ended up, just by happenstance, with my first job it was Chase at the time, the bank, working as a personnel assistant, to somebody who was starting up a learning and development department for operations and systems at Chase.
Gotcha.
And that's how my career started. It was kind of like I had applied for jobs as a sales assistant at a brokerage firm and, all these different things. And this ended up, and I just built my career from there: leadership development, talent management, DEI. I launched diversity and inclusion initiatives at JP Morgan in the early 90s.
Wow.
So, exactly. And that's a time when it was like, well, benchmarking, well, what are the other investment banks and commercial banks doing? And it was like, there's no one to really benchmark against at this point. So my whole career ended up, just through a series of opportunities, being in change, whether it was developing, reaching your potential, working in banking with multiple mergers and acquisitions, and helping employees and leaders navigate these massive changes where they were saying goodbye to their beloved colleagues, or being asked to do their job differently, or being asked to do the job of 3 people, and all of that. And so you can see where that psychology degree really came in handy. And my love for helping people became my career. So, I just kept growing my career in corporate. I was a pioneer in many ways. In the 90s, I was part of one of the first job share partnerships at JP Morgan. And so for those of your listeners who don't know, job sharing is where 2 people share one full-time role, and you each work part-time. I was able to work 2 10-hour days, and so 20 hours, got full benefits, got promoted with my job share partner to VP, at the time. So I've always been on the cutting edge of what's new and what are the possibilities. I always thought you know what, when I have kids, and I knew I wanted to have children, and everyone around me was making choices about, you either stay at home and give up your career, or you're working and you're having 1 or 2 nannies and you're barely seeing your kids for an hour a day. And I knew that neither one of those was a choice for me. So I don't know, I manifested a job share that, where I was able to do both. I was able to be home and go to Gymboree and music together, and also be still engaged in my career, not just a job.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about me, in your introduction, you said grace and ease. Yes, people are probably very surprised to hear those words used with leadership, because leadership is not an easy job. And I feel like it's just gotten tougher and tougher, right? Where, as the years are going on, I mean, the new Gallup survey results are out from 2022. 59% of employees are quiet quitting. So that's the term that I think we've heard more frequently.
Yeah.
Where someone's just filling a seat and looking at the clock. And then, I don't know if you or your listeners have heard this term. Now there's loud quitting.
Okay. I haven't heard that. What's that?
Okay. So loud quitting is not taking your feet and walking out the door. Loud quitting is then that's 18% of people. We are actively trying to harm the organization.
Wow. Yeah. Seeking
So
revenge.
now we not only have quiet quitting, which managers and leaders are just overwhelmed with. Now we have loud quitting. And then there's the third category, which is 23% are employees who reported thriving. So we've got 23% of people thriving, 59% of employees quiet quitting, just like doing what they can to get through the day, and 18% loud quitting.
Wow, about to burn the place down.
Yeah, right? I read that and I was like, ooh, this is a new one for me. That grace and ease was something that came naturally to me, but it made me a misfit in corporate. And so I can remember when I was 24 years old and got put in charge of developing an entire curriculum for the clerical employees at Chase. So big responsibility, a year and a half into my career. And part of that was meeting and selecting and negotiating with consultants. And one day after I'd been on calls with consultants, my manager calls me into her office and says, somebody saw me. And I realized after it was on the phone with the consultant on this phone. And during that call, I will tell you, I was negotiating the price. I got that consultant to slash the price in half. During that call, my manager said, have you been on personal calls this morning? And I was like, I'm 24 years old and I'm just like, oh my God, am I in trouble? And then I look back and I'm like, actually, I was on the call with the vendor and I cut the price in half. I wasn't like, I'm going to get her to lower. She was a lovely human being. I was genuinely having a conversation with her. We were enjoying. I might have even been laughing. I'm sure I was smiling. Just, you have a great program and here's what I think whatever.
Personable.
And I was accused of being on personal calls. So when I think back and reflect on my journey, I feel like that feeling that no, actually work doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
And it can be fun and enjoyable. And it's not this big competitive thing. And then the other story, which I like to share, is we did a 360 feedback. So this is a few years later in my career. And 360 feedback is where you get feedback from people who report to you, from your peers and your manager. So 360.
360.
Exactly. And so I get this feedback and it's something like that I don't meet deadlines or they don't have confidence that I'm meeting deadlines or, something like that. And I was so perplexed. So I'm having a debrief conversation with my leader at the time, who was president of the Jungian Psychology Association. So very psychologically oriented. And at a certain point, he just looks at me and he said, Sheila, don't you realize that you're a zebra in a herd of horses? And I went, it was like, what? They noticed? Like, I'm different. Like, I was the one sitting in meetings. And this is not like, we are not having life or death situations in banking. I was in HR. This is not, and people would be in meetings and just so stressed and so about whatever the project was that we were working on. And I would just be sitting there, my 25, 26-year-old self going, God, what is everyone so stressed out about? And because I had this ease about work, it didn't mean I was less committed than anyone else. It didn't mean that I was working, less or contributing less than anyone else. But the perception was, she's different.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was almost a point of shame for me back then, oh, I'm not fitting in and people don't think, and then as I grew and matured, now I wear it as a point of pride. And I would say, if you're the zebra in your corporate job, be proud, wear it proudly, because all that meant is that I didn't buy into that old paradigm of leadership, that it's pushing through and it's tough and it's stress and it's hustle and it's competition and that financial gains and the corner office and the, nice address and the vacations and the car, like that's the measure of success. And I think I just naturally always just didn't buy into that.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that we have a lot of people who have bought into that over the course of their careers and, and come to a certain point that it's like, okay, I have the corner office, I have the fancy cars and the home and the money and, whatever, all of the trappings, the Instagram fabulous life.
Sure.
But inside, I'm dying. Like, I'm not feeling good. I'm stressed. The burnout statistics now, you read that the World Health Organization has redefined burnout as a syndrome tied to chronic workplace stress that is not managed well. So it's not a medical condition. They're classifying it as an occupational phenomenon. And so what I find is a lot of the very successful senior leaders that I work with have this enormous external success. I mean, people would look at them and go like, wow, I want to be them. And yet, from the holistic success standpoint, what's my personal life like? Am I really satisfied with what I'm doing? So something that came naturally to me for whatever reason, I don't know why, that little girl that was taking care of her dolls and all of that, it really, now I look at leaders with such compassion for the stress that they're under, that, and when we look at those Gallup survey results, of course, that's not just the employees. The leaders are in there too, suffering from the burnout and the stress and all of that. And then on top of that, they're being asked to, motivate people and increase productivity. Oh, and by the way, your budget's been cut and you have to lay off half your people and the jobs are being sent overseas. And so for me, I look at it with such compassion of like, if we don't create this new model of leadership where the leader's well-being is at the foundation of it, taking care of yourself, taking care of your own burnout, taking care of your own, lack of engagement, we're just going to see more and more leaders get burnt out. And then, as per, I know your audience is a lot of entrepreneurs and also female entrepreneurs. We're talking about women who, are leaving the corporate environment, maybe are leaders in their own business, are leaders in their community, leaders with their family. And a lot of the women that I meet, the high-performing women, have been leaning way heavily into their masculine energy. Right? Like on overdrive, that pressure to like be and talk.
Form and go. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, I loved the coffee cocktails and conversation with Samara Bay that you held recently. And it was, let's change the sound of leadership, right?
Yeah.
Let's not, and this goes back to my work in D&I, which was, are we helping people or teaching people who are not the majority in the workplace how to fit in and be like that old paradigm? Or are we creating an environment that is so inclusive that leadership doesn't look or sound a certain way? Because at the end of the day, one of the things that I learned very early on in my DEI career was how much energy is wasted that could be going into innovation and, satisfying customers and all that.
Yeah.
That's right. All that energy that's being wasted for people trying to fit in to a certain mold. And then that feeling when you don't fit in, like, I know that feeling. And it really, and then you're just thinking like, oh, how can I be more like that? And how can I fit in better? And it's really getting to the point. And of course, oh, P.S., we just had a global pandemic,
Right.
mental health crisis in the country. So, we're also dealing with people who are not engaged. Stress is at a record high. 44% of people reported having a lot of stress the day before in the Gallup survey. So that's a lot that we're putting on leaders. And then when people leave the organization to become entrepreneurs, people don't realize you left that toxic boss or that toxic environment behind, and then you're doing it in your own business.
Yeah.
So how many entrepreneurs do you know who are just like in that hustle and grind mode and working 24/7 and letting go of other areas of their life that are really important to their overall success, like their physical well-being, getting exercise, spending quality time with their families or any loved ones without, being so distracted and checking their phone 24/7. So whether you're a leader in a corporation or it's your own business, I just feel like this is so critical right now. I feel like we are at this point that it's becoming a crisis.
Yeah. I feel like we are like at the beginning of a renaissance when it comes to like everybody kind of checking themselves. I also think that the days of working at the same job for 40, 50 years from the moment you graduate or get out of high school and you're there in the same office, those days are gone too. I think that's my parents' generation. Now a millennial or a Gen Zer, as they enter the workforce, they don't stay at the same job for more than 4 or 5 years, and then they move on to something else or they create their own thing. It's really, really fascinating to me to see how the workforce has changed, but we're still have these systems in place to support a corporate model.
Yeah.
And they've got to adapt for sure. My question to you is, who was a leader that inspired you? Like, because you have this great approach, you're the zebra and you're inclusive and you did DEI work, but was there someone in your journey that you looked up to, or you thought this person is a good leader, I want to mentor them or something like that? Who inspired you?
Actually, it was my first manager at Chase who, and interestingly, at first, they hadn't completed their internal search, so they weren't able to offer me the job. And I ended up taking another job, but I just had connected so much with this leader, Elizabeth, shout out if you're listening. I just had this connection, like she was somebody who was going to actually care about my development and my growth. It's funny, I took this other job, which was as a brokerage assistant, when I didn't get that job because I was like, I was 22 years old and I needed a job. And I went and called her on my first break. And I said, I know I told you I took another job, but I really want to work for you. And if there's an opportunity, please still keep me in mind. And 2 weeks later, they did. And I think it's what I saw and what I felt was somebody who didn't just look at me as, the productivity that I could offer, but, she gave great feedback. B, I was basically an admin assistant when I started, but she wouldn't just give me something and say, here, type this. Right. She would explain to me what the context was so that I had a connection between my work and the outcome. She gave me feedback. And sometimes things that weren't so easy, about my style and the way I came across and all of those things that, like, what a gift to get that early in your career. Somebody that really sees you.
Yes, and takes the time to nurture that and bring the best out of you. And I think when we become entrepreneurs, we don't have that. We don't have the boss. We don't have the mentor. We're now our own person. And that's part of the reason why I created Women on the Rise, is to recognize women that are on the rise because they don't have the leader, the mentor. When you finally left corporate and you're like, okay, I'm going to, launch my own program here to support leaders. Was that transition hard from leaving corporate to now becoming your own boss and entrepreneur?
Well, what I have done is I I have invested in myself and in being part of communities to support. So most recently, the Bra Network, before that, being part of other programs with other female leaders. And it's interesting because I do one-on-one coaching and it's so powerful. And I also believe in that belonging to a group and that support. So as a coach, I'm kind of your one woman cheering squad, and not just like, yeah, you can do it, but giving techniques that I learned for it, and isn't it so interesting that all of this personal development work that we would say was the most transformational, in terms of like, how do I regulate my nervous system and shut down that talk track in my head telling me I can't do this and I can't be successful. None of that is taking place in corporate. So with over 35 years in corporate, and I've had access to the top programs from the top universities and consultants internationally, and they give all these great models, but it never goes to the how. So I can give a model for like how to have a difficult conversation. That's one that's always a big one, right? Whether you're in corporate or an entrepreneur. And yet I could have the best model for having that conversation. But if my brain is going, oh my God, the person's going to cry. What is it going to be like? It's going to be so difficult. And then, of course, we know that our primitive brain is like basically telling us like, abort, it's not safe, you're going to die.
Right.
So that's where I invested in myself so that the transition, I can't even imagine being out there on your own as an entrepreneur. I don't know how people do it. And for me personally, a lot of stress in my life manifests in physical symptoms and illness. And so I am so cognizant of how am I supporting myself, my well-being, and it's the inner work, right? That, everyone's looking for the results, like, how do I make six figures my first, year in business? And it's like, okay, let's look inside and do the inner work to get the outer results. And like I said, I can't even imagine starting an entrepreneurial journey without having that support.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And well, what happens is you get burnout, you get frustrated, and then you're just like, fuck it, I'm out of here. I'm done. I see this cycle a lot, especially among women. I definitely see them be the hardest on themselves. They suffer from a lot of negative self-talk. And it's not until they're at like a breaking point until they're like, I need help. What would you say are the triggers for people realizing, oh, wait, I need support in this as an entrepreneur, or even someone in corporate? What would you say is like something that's like a red flag for someone?
I think that the red flag is when, I know when I've left jobs when it was like, I should have left a while ago. And I'm kind of like, instead of having that excitement about the job, or in this case, about their business, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I got to go do whatever for the business. Like when you're feeling like dread instead of excitement for your own business, for sure, that's a red flag. And just that level of stress, and whatever it is, burnout, some of the symptoms of burnout, right, are loss of interest in things that you love, feeling really tired, feeling, disengaged and not motivated. And so if you're not motivated for your own business,
yeah,
that's going to be a tough road. So yeah, I would just say if, when you're not feeling motivated, when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling stressed about your own business, which I do think most entrepreneurs are not just like looking for, what's going to be a profitable business. Most people are going into it because it's something they're really excited about, right? Where, I'm so excited about supporting women and, helping them be successful in their journey. And, so I find that most entrepreneurs are doing something that they're really excited and passionate about. And if you're feeling that starting to wane, probably a sign that you need help.
Yeah. Okay.
And no shame in that. Zero shame in that.
Yeah.
We were all programmed as a certain way in this old paradigm of leadership. And like you said, women particularly, it's like, do it all. I got to do it all myself. I got to tough it out. Like, you don't. You absolutely don't. And you shouldn't. And of course, I would say when it's gone really too far is when you're starting to have the physical symptoms, when you're not sleeping.
Manifestations of it. Yeah. And now the other side of that is, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. I now have my first couple team members. I've now been put into a leadership role. What advice would you give that entrepreneur who is now thrusted into a leadership role as being an employer? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I first realized that being a leader is part of your job now, right? And over the course of my career, I have actually trained and worked with a lot of new leaders. So whether it's corporate or not, and that transition from doing to motivating and directing others is a huge transition. And many people don't even realize, like, oh, actually, I need to operate differently now. So now it's not about just doing. It's about, what would be developmental and exciting for my team, that you need to share your vision with the team and your direction, because that's the other thing. You can be brilliant and have all these great ideas and you're like zooming full speed ahead, and it's like, oh wait, I left a few people behind me and that was my team. So yeah, it is a job, and it is, it's time to really develop in your own leadership style and recognize that's a job now.
Yeah, for sure. I know for me, the thing I struggled with when I first started really, being put in a leadership position, the first time was when I was a principal, and I'm supervising teachers, is that I thought I could just do it myself. I'll just do it. It'll take.
Yeah, it's easy to do it myself.
Yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'll just do it. It's fine. And then I realized, oh, I have a lot to do now. It was very hard for me to delegate. Very, very hard. Yeah. It's control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, like I said, it's like you're no longer doing it all. And I think you raised such a good point, which is, in the beginning, it is going to take more time to explain it to someone else, to get someone else to do it somewhat closely to the way you would do it. Because that's the other thing, right? It's letting go of that control and that perfection, because other people are probably not going to do it quite the way you're doing it. Yeah. And so you have to get past that, like you experience, you have to get past, oh, I could do it myself quicker and easier. And it's like, well, why do I have people working for me? And why am I paying people?
Right, exactly. How is an entrepreneur feeling before they're like, I need to work with Sheila? I know you said you work one-on-one. So describe what I'm feeling if I'm ready to seek out and work with you.
I think it's that feeling of overwhelm, burnout. It's a lot of overwhelm, distraction, lack of motivation, just feeling more stressed than fun. Being an entrepreneur is a fabulous journey. It's so exciting, but it is actually secretly, I think, the biggest personal growth opportunity of your life. And I don't think anyone tells you that, it's so all of a sudden when you start to hear that negative self-talk and, oh, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. Oh, I have so much to do. How am I going to get this all done? That's when you reach out and you get some help, because as a coach, understanding, what's going on for you personally, not just, anyone, and really helping to diagnose, like, where are you getting in your own way? Where do you have tremendous strengths that you're not using? And I just think to get an outside perspective of somebody who is very compassionate and caring. And I don't I can't emphasize this enough. I do not look at anyone who reaches out for help from a coach or, anywhere as like broken. Like there is nothing wrong with you. Everything you're feeling is 100% normal and human.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just part of our humanness, is that our brain, that primitive part of our brain, does not want us to change. It equates the unfamiliar with danger.
Yes.
And it doesn't want us to change. And to be an entrepreneur, you kind of have to throw out a lot of what you learned working in corporate, right? You need to really change who you are being. And when you're clinging to that identity that you had in corporate, you're going to keep getting frustrated. And so when you're saying, wow, this feels hard, and I'm like, maybe hopefully people would seek out help before they're ready to give up.
Yeah.
But also when you're thinking, as you mentioned before, like, nah, I don't know, maybe this isn't for me. It's not. It's just that you need to unlearn a lot of what you've learned by being an employee.
Yeah. We are very much programmed, even in our schools, right? We're going into kindergarten and first grade as an employee of the teacher. And we're in this community to learn, and we're all going to approach things differently. But that's the boss. If the boss says it's raise your hand, you're going to do it. We're indoctrinated that way. I find that really fascinating. Now, when you broke up with corporate, was it a smooth transition for you, or were you just like, I'm taking everything but the stapler? I mean, were you ready to move and do your own thing, or like,
no, it was gradual. It was gradual.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so and honestly, I know people who have done it differently and been what we like to call released from their job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the universe has a way of, releasing. A colleague of mine through my Mind Magic program was also, I think, a middle school administrator, and just really wanting to start her business as a master pranic energy healer, and had been dabbling in it. And then like one day she pops in and says, I've been released from my job. And you know what? I am very much, I didn't talk about intuition and just this belief that like things will roll out in your life exactly the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so whether you make a gradual transition or you are released and you finally, that thing that you've been wanting to do and focus on full time, it's time. And I also know people, like you said, who just are like, I can't take it anymore, and I'm quitting. And if people have that option available to them, great. And my biggest concern about that part is I also know, and what I teach my clients is how to regulate your nervous system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how to take like a step and not a huge leap, which is going to just like kick your nervous system into like, high alert. And so, if you're going to do that, hey, I'm just going to take the leap and leave my job, understand that you really need support there, because you need to get that you need to be regulated so that you're the best you can be for your business.
Yeah. I think that's so unbelievably important. And I see that a lot among, especially female entrepreneurs, the kind of dysregulation and not trusting their intuition, and then eventually being like, oh, maybe I should have just trusted that, because here I am and it's happening,
Well, yeah, because in their corporate lives, there was a way to do things and an answer, right? And people were telling you. I mean, that one of the biggest things for me in corporate was I had tremendous intuition, and everything was facts and data and what's the policy on this and this on that. And so you get trained to not trust your intuition and your knowing. And when you become an entrepreneur, you are creating something totally new. And that's the beauty of it. And also, if you're trying to keep going the way you were in corporate, the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been So rich. I'm loving all of this. Now, before we get carried away, because we've been talking for a bit, I definitely want to talk about what you've brought my audience today. One is your holistic leadership audit. Now, I think this is fascinating. Tell me about this first.
So the holistic leadership audit gives you an opportunity to just really reflect on your holistic success. So not just in your career, but in different areas of your personal life, and see where do you have the most satisfaction and where do you have the least satisfaction. And what I find is that it helps people to be less overwhelmed at like, I don't know, it just all feels like too much, and focus in, and then some really juicy reflection questions about what it would feel like, and where would it make the biggest impact in your overall satisfaction to start to work. Because very often, your career success and your financial success looks pretty good, but you're still not feeling great. So that's the holistic leadership audit. Kind of helps you, basically audit, all of the areas that go into holistic success.
I love that. That's going to be in the show notes as well as all of your contact, email, website, all the places. But you brought 2 gifts. So tell us about the micro learning club.
Yeah, so I recorded a micro learning based on a workshop that I have done for hundreds of leaders in corporate called Grace and Ease: How to Embrace a New Paradigm of Leadership. So it's a real how-to of understanding how do you become different, so it's about, so if you're right now the opposite of grace and ease, stress and hustle, right, how do you embrace a new way of being to support your success? So I think it's about 30 minutes, somewhere between 25, 30 minutes. And I think people will get a lot out of it. I'm very much into being very practical, very neuroscience based, so that I break it down. It's really easy and practical, tools that you can walk away with.
I love great takeaway. As a former teacher and principal, I like takeaway. I don't want fluff and ideas. You can imagine that. No, I want to give me something to do that's going to give me direction or inspiration. I love that. Thank you so much for bringing both of those things. Now, if anyone's listening and they're driving in their car right now, just say really quickly, what's your website, where we can find you so they can remember.
Sure. So Sheila Eggert on Sheila.Eggert on Instagram, same on Facebook. My website is the abbreviation for Your Inner Circle. So YINC, YINC, coaching.com. So people can find me there, and even my email, Sheila@yinkcoaching.com, if you want to reach out. And I also offer, if anyone just wants to explore more, what it would look like, how I could support your listeners in, one-on-one, or perhaps somebody wants to do something for their team. I'm absolutely open to doing that as well. I just don't have any open workshops planned right now. And so reach out. I'm happy to do, a half-hour strategy session with you so you can better understand how I might be able to support you. And also, I'll help you get a little clarity about, even helping you set a direction.
Oh, I love all of that, Sheila. I need this. I need to reach out to you. I'm just like, I need that too. This has been full of so much knowledge and great nuggets of wisdom. Thank you so much. Now, before we wrap up, we've got to get carried away. I get carried away with all my guests.
Yes.
So the first thing is, what's something you're totally obsessed with? Is it baking? Is it dogs? I know you just moved, so I'm wondering if that's your answer. What do you get carried away about?
That is my answer. I am obsessed with the beach. And I just moved to living where the path to the beach is in my backyard. And, I know, one of your questions is sometimes like, what show are you binge watching? I haven't turned on my TV. It's beautiful here in Southern California. It's summertime. And in my free time, I am walking my dog on the beach. I am walking on the beach. I'm sitting on the beach. I'm obsessed with the beach right now and how close I am to it.
I love it. I love it. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. I've never actually lived in a state that didn't have a coast. I just thought about that right now. I've always lived at a place that always had a beach. Yeah.
Yes.
Virginia and California and Washington always had a beach. To my landlocked friends, come out to California. The beach is calling you. And then, of course, the opposite of that is something you can't stand that other people get very, very carried away about. For me, one thing that comes to mind is I cannot stand sriracha. I can't get behind sriracha. People put it on everything.
I know.
Do it. I can't do it. What about you?
So I could just agree with you there because I do. I don't get it. I'm not sriracha, but for me, it is crime drama on TV.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Which they are the shows that are the highest rated, the longest running, CSI in 50 different cities for multiple years. Like, I have never been able to get behind that. And I've tried now and then because they are so popular, but yeah.
Procedural crime dramas, those are called. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not for me.
Yeah. I understand that. I get that. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sheila. This has been so fun. Please follow Sheila in all the places, and everything will be in the show notes. So when you do park your car after listening to this, you can go back to your phone and, do it safely. Don't do it while you're driving. In the meantime, make sure you like and subscribe and follow us on YouTube or on Instagram, and share this with someone who's having a hard time with leadership or transitioning into entrepreneurship. Sheila is the woman you need to know. Thank you, Sheila, for being my guest and getting carried away.
Thank you. This was fun.
Bye.